on Mass Musical Musings, Wednesdays 5 to 7 p.m. If it's good music, it's on my show. This is a real set list from one of my plots. Billy Joel, Arcade Fire, The Police, Naco and Medicine for the People, The Flaming Lips, Radiohead, Peter Gabriel, Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, Kanye West, Kamasi Washington, Red Hot Chili Peppers, The White Stripes, Beyonce, and Joe Satriani. If it's good, I'm playing it Wednesdays and streaming worldwide at latesradio.org.
Hi, I'm Ryan Blaney, a third-generation race car driver, and I dedicate a lot of my time going fast. But when my grandpa was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, it was a very unexpected bump in the road for us. It's important to notice if older family members are acting differently or having trouble with routine tasks. Early detection of Alzheimer's can give your family time to explore support services and access available treatments. If you or your family are noticing changes, it could be Alzheimer's. Talk about seeing a doctor together. Visit alz.org/time-to-talk. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
August was born 3 pounds, 9.8 ounces. When I first saw him, it was a whole range of emotions. There's stuff I still want to do. Being a young dad, it's not giving up. It's shifting. I looked through his eyes. I envisioned a whole future with him already. To throw the first football to him, give him ice cream for the first time. My life is now devoted to his life.
Through all of fatherhood's firsts, never stop being a dad. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
WLCB is a listener-supported station. We rely on your financial help. This, in addition to support from our all-volunteer staff in terms of time and money. Please visit our website at www.latesradio.org and click on Support WLCB. Whatever you can afford to send goes a long way to help keep us on the air. Once again, please visit www.latesradio.org. When you click on Support WLCB and choose an amount, you'll be in business, and so will we.
Get up off your chair. Get moving. Don't tell me this doesn't have a good beat. I see you dancing in your chair.
Are you ready?
I'm always ready.
Are you ready?
Oh yeah. 1, 2, 3.
I saw you were with them last night. I saw you were with them last night. Don't burn the bridge, burn the paper.
Yeah, that's Don't Burn the Bridge, Burn the Paper by Engaging Time, coming to a scenario or a scene or a bar or a hookah bar. I've never been to a hookah bar before. It's coming to a venue near you, hopefully sooner than later, folks. There's a lot of work in progress right now with Engaging Time, so stay tuned. This is 101.5 FM WLCB, Slade's Corner, Wisconsin. This is your Insurance Corner, and we're talking about estate planning, but before we get ahead of myself here, Sean, I wanted to do a shout-out. This morning, I received a check from one of our listeners, and he doesn't know I'm doing this, so George, if you're listening, thank you. George Flolo of the Flolo Corporation had sent us a check for WLCB today for $100.
Wow, thank you.
Yes, sir. So that was a very generous thing. The Flolo Corporation has been a client of mine for 20 years, 21 years, something like that, a family-oriented business. His folks, his dad started the company in a different generation ago, and it's still a thriving, very important piece of business. They've got business all over the world. So thank you, Mr. Flolo, for your kind, generous support for WLCB. I appreciate it very much, and I'm sure the powers that be appreciate it too. I'll be dropping off the check, Sean. I forgot to bring it. It's on my desk. So I'll drop it off in the next couple of days and put it somewhere in the downstairs.
Well, just put it in the Dropbox. Yeah.
Yes, sir. So welcome back, Sean. This is your estate. Your estate. your insurance corner, your estate corner tonight. How you doing, bud?
I'm doing well. Doing well. Been
Yes.
busy today. It's always good to be busy. So
Yes, sir. Yeah, and I'll be seeing you in about a week and a half.
that's what you've been threatening me.
Yeah, well, it's going to happen. I just tomorrow I'll have my itinerary set as to where I'm going and where I'm being, and I do know that on Monday I'm flying out to Florida to talk to a client of mine about this very topic. So, and he knows I'm coming, and he knows why, and he knows why. In fact, I talked with one of my estate planning attorney advisors today, and he's going to send me some stuff. And if I can get together with him between now and the time I leave, I can pick his brain about some specific things that may not be specific to Florida, but are in general things that my client could maybe use or just put a bug in his ear. But no matter what, folks, in the estate planning world, you have to start. And it starts with what happens if, and what do you want to, what are your wishes? That's where it has to start. And a lot of people don't like to have those conversations for whatever the reasons. I totally understand it. You don't want to admit your mortality, and I totally get that. But the one thing I can say is that nobody is guaranteed a permanent place on this earth. We are all going to pass. Pope Francis just passed away, 2 days ago, and that day he was fine. And then the what do you call it? The informational stuff comes over the internet, and Pope Francis passed away, and I'm like, oh my gosh, he was just there for Easter. What the heck happened? Well,
Yeah, he blessed the audience at Easter, and then next day.
Yeah, had a stroke. Actually had a heart failure and a stroke at the same time. So God love him, Godspeed. According to all the reports, Pope Francis was a wonderful human being, a tough guy I think he was from Venezuela, if I'm not mistaken. But he earned every bit of his popehood for sure. But we're back and talking about estate planning, and we just finished discussions of powers of attorney for property and health care. But now the questions have to come in about what do you have, what are your wishes, and and specifically beneficiary designations is where we left off. So a beneficiary designation is on a life insurance policy, whether it's through your corporation or through something that you bought on your own. And these aren't stagnant things, folks. If you're dating somebody and you put somebody in and then you get married, you got to change it. If you have a 401k, I don't know what the law is in Ohio, but I think this is federal law, Sean. I might be wrong about this, but your spouse has to be the beneficiary for an IRA or a 401k, or she has to sign off saying she doesn't want it.
Yeah, I know that to be true because I switched beneficiaries from estate to my wife, and I think even then she needed to sign off. So, yeah, I believe that to be the case.
Yeah, I do know for sure that a spouse has to be a beneficiary. If you're just starting a job, there's no choice. You can't make your kids the estate. You can't make anybody. The spouse has to be the primary unless she specifically signs off and says, nope, that's okay. Make it the estate or make it the charity or make it the kids. I'm okay. So beneficiary designations are important. Bank statements, bank accounts, checking accounts, savings accounts, investment accounts. In the banking world, I think it's called a transfer on death clause, Sean. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. So that's the same as a beneficiary designation. If you have beneficiary designations that are up to speed, they avoid probate. Let me say that again. Beneficiary designations avoid probate. It doesn't necessarily avoid estate issues like estate taxes, for example, if you're lucky enough to have wealth in your life. but it definitely avoids probate. So beneficiary designations are a huge deal. So now, what's the next one? What are considered your assets in an estate? And in some cases, folks, it depends what state you live in, because there's a concept called community property states. And Sean, we're broadcasting out of Slade's Corner, Wisconsin. Wisconsin is what's called a community property state. So if Sally and I decided to buy a house in Wisconsin, it's a 50-50 split. Now that's mostly for divorce or separations or those kind of things. But it's a 50-50 split in a community property state. That doesn't necessarily mean that you can't have other designations or other title holders. But in states like Arizona, there's 7 states. I think Hawaii is one. California and Arizona might be a couple of them. I used to know all the community property states by heart.
Arizona,
but,
Arizona, California, Idaho, Louisiana, Nevada, New Mexico, Texas, Washington, and they listed Wisconsin. Now, when I was in school, Wisconsin was described as a marital property state. So that's what you heard me clicking around looking to see if there is a difference between. But what you're talking about is in a community property state, it's subject to equitable distribution, they call it.
Correct. Yeah. So in a divorce, it's basically a 50-50 unless there was a gifting of something that was just to you, the individual, and it was outside of the marital asset. But that is all going to become a legal thing if there's a separation or divorce. However, that being said, the kind of assets that are in your estate are, and this is not all inclusive by any means, your home, your bank account, your investments, your 401k, your IRAs, your collectibles. If you own a business, that is in your estate. The value of that business is in your estate. Now, this is the one that kind of makes people eyes water, Sean. Your life insurance is a part of your estate. So if you owned nothing but a $5 million life insurance policy, by estate tax rules, you're worth $5 million. Even if it's term insurance, you're worth $5 million. So life insurance is an asset insofar as the estate is concerned. So all of these things, and there's a myriad of other things that could be a part of your estate. This is just scratching the surface of the more obvious ones. So now let's say you died without a will. It's called dying intestate. So Sean, any thoughts on what happens if you died without a will?
Well, then it's going to have to be decided by the court. It's going to go through probate.
It absolutely is going to go through probate.
And you're not going to, it's the court that's going to decide the division of the assets, and then that becomes kind of a feeding frenzy, if I remember correctly, because everybody who thinks they have claim to that estate, then they have to petition and apply, and then it has to be decided and ruled. In the meanwhile, the cash gauge keeps spinning and spinning as everybody is adjudicating that estate. That's correct.
So, generally speaking, folks, most people would think, well, the wife should be the second in line. The wife should be able to get whatever was left over. If you die without a will, folks, that is not the case. Unless there's no children in the life of the decedent, the spouse would get a share, maybe 50% tops of the estate. And it gets more complicated if you have children from multiple marriages, because everybody's got their hand out now, to your point, Sean. As an example, Papa Hallis, George Hallis, died without a will. He died with a will, but he was in probate for 20 years because all of the family members came out with their hands out. Aunts, uncles, cousins, nephews, nephew third removed, they all had their hand out because he died just with a will. And it took 20 years for that whole estate to get unwound. So dying without a will, you let the state take over. The attorneys are going to make a fortune on you because they're going to spend a lot of time fighting with people, dealing with the courts. And in the court system, folks, the lawyers get paid first, period, full stop. The lawyers get paid first. And if it's a complex estate with properties in multiple states, each state has its own probate rules. So the estate is going to have to hire attorneys in, let's say, Illinois, Wisconsin, Florida, North Carolina, Arizona, and Texas, if you own properties in all those states, because each state has their own probate system and their own rules. So it gets really messy, especially if you've got a big estate and you've got family members that got their hands out. So dying without a will is probably the worst thing that could happen, because your legacy is now potentially going to get destroyed and eaten up with legal fees and bad karma. And as you pointed out earlier in the show, Sean, money has a way of bringing out the ugliness in people really quick.
That's. I've seen it. I've seen families. Everybody's great. It's always their big bear hugs and Thanksgiving dinners, and then somebody finds out that Papa's got a couple of $1 million, and everybody starts scheming and looking for an edge and an angle. Not all families, but some do, and it gets ugly.
Yes, it does. So dying without a will, dying intestate, is a bad thing. Dying with a will, folks, this is a common misconception. Dying with a will guarantees probate. It doesn't avoid it. It guarantees it. It just now makes it orderly. The family member who passed away has established his or her wishes as to the distribution of the estate, and it will go to wherever it's going to go, whether there's a spouse around or not, kids around or not. It's an orderly process, and if the will is legitimate and it's not challenged, which, by the way, it could be challenged. If it was done on a napkin, it's going to get challenged. There's no such thing as a verbal will. I know I've seen a couple little anecdotes that suggests that a verbal will could work, but generally speaking, the moment a third party shows up and said that's not what he said or that's not what she said, that kills the whole thing. There has to be unanimity, and even then, the courts are going to go, well, Johnny Lunchbucket didn't have his will together, and that means he died without one. You saying that there's a verbal commitment, where's the document that says this? Nothing in writing. Sorry, Charlie, there's nothing here. But if you have a will, it's in writing, it's been notarized, it's been witnessed, it's been dated, and it's up to speed. Wills can be changed on the fly. They should be done, in my opinion, with an attorney that you trust. You can do it online. I'm not a big fan of those because people have metaphorically ADHD with these kind of things, and they get very frustrated because they don't understand what they don't understand, and they either say, fine, the heck with it, hit a button and sign it and be done, and now there's a question of whether or not what they did is even legitimate if something happens. But if you have a legitimate will and it's all tight, you are going to go through probate. It's just going to be a lot more orderly. It still could take time, and in some cases there can be challenges, but if it's done orderly, the judge will usually throw those people out. Now, I know my dad had a will and a trust, for example, and one of the things that he always said in the trust was, if anybody raises their voice or causes a problem or throws a monkey wrench into this thing, they're out. And that's why it's important to have an attorney who's an umpire, not the trustee of the estate, but a third party who's still kind of overseeing as an umpire, who doesn't have any skin in the game except for their fees. And if the trust or the will says anybody causes a problem, that person is out. That's it. And I always found that to be that was my dad. He didn't want problems. We had 6 kids. There could be, and everybody had their own personality. So, dying with a will guarantees probate, but it's an orderly process. The other thing about a will, folks, is that it's public. So nothing can happen for the first 6 months of the estate. You can probably tinker a little bit, but from a practical matter, the entire estate is now open to the public, which means creditors can come out of the woodwork. Any extended family members could come out of the woodwork and say, well, Don said I could have this, and Don said I could have this, and yada, yada, yada. But nothing can be done for the first 6 months in most states. And then once it gets to probate, then the will is read, kind of thing, and it goes through a process. So a will can be done whether you're rich or whether you're poor. I'm not talking about estate taxes at this point. I'm just talking about putting together a program for your family, for yourself, that creates a distinctive line of finality of your life. That's it. Not complicated. So what if you want to avoid probate? Sean, what's the answer?
Trust.
Yep. What kind of a trust?
Well, I guess you can have several, but revocable or irrevocable trusts come to mind.
Yep. So a revocable trust is exactly what it says. It can be changed. If you do have a revocable trust, usually the lawyer is going to include a will. He's also going to include a pour-over will, which basically says anything left out of the estate that should have been poured into the estate will be poured into the estate. There may be a little bit of probate with that, but eventually it'll get poured into the revocable trust. There's usually also in this powers of attorney. It's a very robust document. So you got powers of attorney, you've got the pour-over will. Now you're putting... Oh, it's got a living will, which I didn't even talk about before. The living will basically says, keep me going or unplug me, ostensibly. But then the major meat of it is your assets end up in the trust and owned by the trust. You still have full control over those assets. There are certain assets that probably should be left out of the estate, depending on the size of the estate, and that's a different discussion altogether. We're not going to get into that tonight. But your assets can be put into the trust. Any assets that are in there will avoid probate, and the day after they put you in the ground, the estate can be opened. It's completely private. It is not public. And the only people that care are the people that designed the trust, the attorney that might be around to administer the trust, because there is certain... The trust now, once you die, Sean, the trust becomes irrevocable, essentially, and it becomes its own tax entity while the estate is being distributed. So just because you have a revocable living trust doesn't mean, okay, Dad died, so we can go in and get the assets and everything is done. No, contraire. There's a tax form. The government wants one more piece of your action. And one of those things that you're going to be taxed on potentially is your 401k or IRAs. Even if you put the life insurance in a trust, the trust is going to receive it tax-free. Get your attorney's opinion as to whether or not the proceeds are going to come out tax-free. They should come out tax-free to the beneficiaries, but you really want to make sure that it's done the correct way. You don't have to put a life insurance policy into the revocable trust unless it makes estate tax sense. Again, different discussion. So a revocable trust allows you to change things on the fly. Is called a codicil. One little by the way clause about revocable trust, and Sean, you probably know this being in the banking business. If I put my house in the trust and I want to refinance it, I have to pull it out of the trust because the bank wants the title to be clean. And then you have to put it back in. It's a pain in the neck.
Yes, it is.
But unfortunately, it is a thing, folks. If you keep the house out of the trust, and the whole idea was to put it in the trust so it avoided probate, if you die while you're either refinancing or you die after you refinance the house and you forgot to put it back in, I'm here to tell you, you goofed. And it's not a big deal, but it's still a big deal because now the house has to be probated before it ends up back in the trust. What else? Okay, irrevocable trusts is exactly what those are. Once you set up an irrevocable trust, and I'll give you some examples in a second, an irrevocable trust means exactly that. Once you set it up, you don't have any control over that asset or what's in there, and you may have to be paying for things like life insurance. You put life insurance in an irrevocable trust, you may still have to pay the premium. There's a process for that, but the life insurance is, if it's done correctly, it's now outside of your estate. If it's done correctly, if it's not done correctly and you're putting it in after the fact, you have to wait 5 years. It's called a 5-year look back. If you die within 5 years, it all comes back, including the big life insurance policy that you have. If you buy a life insurance policy and have the trust own it outright, originally, it's out of your estate no matter how big the life insurance policy is. It's an estate tax tool to reduce the estate taxes so that your properties don't have to be liquidated or your assets don't have to be liquidated. Sean, there's a bunch more I want to talk about, but we are running out of time. We're about 2 minutes left before 7 o'clock. Any thoughts?
No, I think we should continue this discussion, though, because it makes sense. And, if we can get one person to kind of take a look at this, because dealing with your own mortality is not easy.
Nope.
So, and a lot of people will say, well, I don't need a will because I'm not that old. And then, Sean and the beer truck scenario happens and you needed a will.
Yep, absolutely. And that goes for your 20-somethings, folks, your kids that are just starting their lives. Something happens. We had an extended family member, 26-year-old, died in a car accident just a few months ago. So bad things happen to good people. But with all that, we're going to talk about more of this next week. My name is Bill Miksch, president of WDMA Financial Group. That's Sean Hauser. This is your Insurance Corner. We will see you guys next week. Have a great week. Go Cubs, and we'll see you all next week. Have a great night, everybody.